Love X Revenge. This channel tells stories about love, betrayal, sacrifice, and the moments when fate turns everything upside down. What you are about to hear is not just a story of wealth and loss, but of pain so deep it blinds, and love so strong it survives even death. The rain fell softly, as if the sky itself was mourning. The cemetery was almost empty, except for one man kneeling before a polished marble gravestone. He was dressed in an expensive black coat, but it hung on him loosely, as though he had lost more than just weight over the years. His shoulders trembled, and his hands pressed into the cold stone as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Alexander Whitmore, a self-made millionaire known for his iron will and ruthless business decisions, was crying like a broken man. The name on the grave read, Emily Whitmore, beloved daughter, gone too soon. I'm sorry, Alexander whispered, his voice cracking. I should have protected you. I should have listened. Tears streamed down his face, splashing onto the flowers he had brought, white lilies, her favorite. He came here every year on this day, without fail, no matter where in the world his business took him. This grave was the one place where his power, his money, and his influence meant absolutely nothing. What Alexander didn't know was that just beyond the line of dark trees, a woman stood silently, watching him. Her hair was tucked beneath a hood, her face partially hidden, but her eyes were fixed on the man at the grave. They were the same shade of gray as his. The same eyes that had once looked up at him with trust, love, and admiration. Emily Whitmore was alive. 10 years earlier, Emily had been declared dead after a car explosion on a remote coastal road. The police had told Alexander that the car had gone off a cliff, that the fire had been too intense, that identification was only possible through a necklace recovered from the wreckage. That necklace was now buried with an empty coffin. Emily remembered that night vividly. She had been 22, full of dreams, but also full of fear. Fear of her father's business partner, Victor Hale, a man with a charming smile and cold eyes. She had discovered documents proving Victor was laundering money and planning to frame Alexander if anything went wrong. When she confronted him, Victor didn't deny it. He simply smiled and told her accidents happened all the time. She ran. The explosion wasn't an accident. It was meant to kill her. But fate intervened. A fisherman found her unconscious, thrown clear from the car before it exploded. Her face was burned, her body broken, and for weeks she drifted between life and death in a small, underfunded hospital far from the city. Victor believed she was dead. Alexander was told the same. When Emily finally woke, she begged the doctors not to contact her father. She knew Victor's reach. She knew that if he discovered she was alive, Alexander would be the real target. With the help of one compassionate nurse and a new identity, Emily disappeared from the world that believed she was buried. From afar, she watched as her father unraveled. Alexander had once been a man of confidence and ambition. After Emily's death, he became a shadow of himself. He shut down emotionally, pushed people away, and buried himself in work. The media praised his success, never seeing the emptiness behind his eyes. Emily watched interviews where he spoke her name only once, his voice faltering before he changed the subject. She read articles about his sleepless nights, his visits to charities for orphan children, his sudden withdrawal from society events. He never forgave himself. Now, 10 years later, Emily stood only meters away from him, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. She had returned, not out of curiosity, but because the time had finally come. Victor Hale was no longer untouchable. His empire was crumbling, and Emily had gathered enough evidence to destroy him completely. But first, she needed to face the one person she had hurt the most by staying silent. Alexander collapsed forward, resting his forehead against the gravestone. If I could trade everything, he sobbed, every dollar, every company, I'd do it just to hear you call me Dad, one more time. Emily covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing prepared her for the sound of his grief. This wasn't the distant, cold man she remembered from boardrooms and headlines. This was her father, shattered. She took a step forward, then another, her legs trembling. The gravel crunched softly beneath her boots. Alexander froze. He lifted his head slowly, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption, until he saw her. The world seemed to stop. The woman before him looked older, thinner, her face marked with faint scars, but the eyes were unmistakable. "No," he whispered, "I've finally lost my mind." "Dad," Emily said, her voice barely louder than the rain. Alexander staggered backward as if struck. "This isn't real," he said, shaking his head violently. You're dead. I buried you." "You buried a lie," she replied softly. "I'm alive." His knees gave out, and he fell to the ground. Emily rushed forward, catching him as he collapsed. For a moment, neither spoke. Alexander reached up, his hands hovering near her face, afraid to touch her. "You're warm," he murmured. "You're real." "I'm sorry," Emily cried. "I wanted to come back. I wanted to tell you. But if Victor had known." "Victor." Alexander's eyes darkened, the businessman returning in an instant. "This was about him." Emily nodded. "He tried to kill me. And he would have killed you too." Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might vanish again. For the first time in a decade, he felt whole. The grave behind them, once the center of his grief, now felt like a cruel monument to deception. Days later, the world would be shaken by the news. Victor Hale was arrested after Emily's testimony and evidence exposed years of corruption, fraud, and attempted murder. The media erupted when Emily Whitmore appeared alive, standing beside her father. But none of that mattered in the quiet moments. Alexander stood in his study one evening, watching Emily laugh softly as she explored the home she had grown up in. The sound filled spaces that had been silent for too long. "I thought revenge would be enough," Emily said later, standing beside him at the window. "But seeing you at that grave, I realized love was what I'd been running from." Alexander placed a hand over hers. "We lost 10 years, he said. But we have the rest of our lives." Outside, the city lights glowed, unaware of the miracle that had unfolded. A millionaire who had mourned a dead daughter, and a daughter who had watched from the shadows, finally reunited. Love had survived betrayal. Truth had defeated lies. And the grave that once symbolized the end of everything now marked the beginning of a new chapter.